and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Knudsen?
Here.
District 1 Morset?
Here.
District 2 Brokaw? Here. District 3 Bernard?
Here.
District 4 Wyland?
Here.
District 5 O'Malley?
Here.
District 6 Birchall?
Here.
Okay, at this time we take comments and suggestions from citizens present. If there's anyone here who would like to address the council on any issue or item that is not on tonight's agenda, but that might have an impact on the city of Hudson or come before the council at a future date, this is your chance. You can come forward. Chief Fry, why don't you start off?
Because of the dry conditions, I felt it necessary today to put a burning ban on for the city of Hudson, the village of North Hudson, the town of Hudson, and the town of Troy. This means no open burning. However, charcoal grills are still allowed. And this will continue until we get the green grass coming up through and the soil temperatures come up and get some rain and the green grass starts showing. So just so to kind of get the word out, if you see anybody burning in their pits or outdoor fireplaces, just ask them to put it out.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the council tonight? This is your chance. I wonder if the council would indulge me rather than waiting to the end of our long agenda for one comment from the mayor. Any objections? It'll be brief. I was challenged by my counterpart, Mayor Richards from River Falls, to enter a competition regarding the census. Thursday is Census Day, which means that the Census Bureau is trying to count how many people there are as of April 1st. And the most efficient way for that to be done is through the mail, and so everyone has their census form. And the challenge is that between Mayor Richards of River Falls and Mayor Hunter and Prescott and Hudson, whichever city has the highest participation, the others are going to buy us dinner or something for our wives. So, but aside from all that, send in your census form. Now's the time to do it. It takes 10 minutes. Okay, moving on to our rather large agenda tonight. Was there anyone else from the audience that wanted to address the council? Let's take on the consent agenda items. Will you read those for us, please?
To approve special meeting minutes and closed session minutes of the March 1st, 2010 Joint Council and EMS meeting, and the regular meeting minutes and closed session minutes of March 1st, 2010, and to approve the special meeting minutes and closed session minutes of March 8th, 2010. To approve a conditional use permit to Linder's Greenhouse Incorporated for a seasonal temporary greenhouse at the South Plaza 94 parking lot as designated in the application with the following conditions. Limited to a period of March 15th to July 20th, 1 year review required, March of 2011. The provision of water must be addressed either with the coffee shop in the parking lot or approved by the water utility. To approve the renewal of the conditional use permit to the Home Depot for the seasonal outdoor sales garden center at 2330 Crestview Drive with the following conditions. Limited to April 1st to July 15th. Allow up to an 8-foot chain link fence and 20-foot by 40-foot greenhouse. Total area limited to 64 feet by 120 feet, 7,680 square feet. Renewal required in 3 years, 2013. To schedule a public hearing for 6:45 p.m. on Monday, May 3rd, 2010 regarding the proposed rezoning of 911 4th Street Municipal Building parking lot from R1, one family residential district, to OFC, and to amend the city comprehensive plan. To schedule a public hearing at 6:50 p.m. on Monday, May 3rd, 2010 to amend the OFC office district to allow other commercial uses through approval of a conditional use permit. To schedule a public hearing at 6:55 p.m. on Monday, May 3rd, 2010 to amend the comprehensive plan for future land use designations and rezoning for Beaneman Farm LLC on the southeast quadrant of Hanley Road and State Highway 35, the Gaffer Properties LLC on the north side of Cooley Road east of 2nd Street, and the Tim and Betty Caruso property at 27 Cooley Road. To approve claims for payment in the amount of $661,377.74. A detailed description is available in the clerk's office on request and is posted on the city's website. To approve the issuance of regular operators licenses for the period March 30th, 2010 through June 30th, 2011 to Krista Baum, River Falls, Wisconsin, Sean Gary, Hudson, Wisconsin, Deborah Johnson, Hudson, Wisconsin, Susan M. Smith, River Falls, Wisconsin, and an issuance of a temporary operator's license to be used July 2nd through July 4th, 2010 during the Hudson Booster Days event to John M. Herrick, Hudson, Wisconsin. To approve the City of Hudson St. Croix EMS entering into an agreement with Americollect Incorporated to serve as a collection agency for the EMS outstanding receivables as submitted with a 30-day provision for termination. To approve the issuance of a temporary Class B retailer's license to the Hudson Boosters Incorporated to sell beer and wine July 2nd through July 4th, 2010 during the Hudson Booster Days in Lakefront Park. To approve the issuance of a Class B beer, Class B liquor license to Hanson Brothers Golf Holdings LLC doing business as Hudson Golf Club at 201 Carmichael Road contingent upon surrender of the current license held by Hudson Wisconsin Country Club Incorporated. To approve entering into a 3-year contract with Apostle Septic to provide portable restrooms in various park locations. To approve a 1-year extension of the current contract with St. Croix Tree Service for tree removal, trimming, and stump grinding services. To approve awarding the 2010 broadleaf weed control and fertilizing contract to BioLawn in the amount of $6,285.70, contingent on BioLawn providing a nutrient management plan and material safety data sheets prior to the startup of the program. To approve no parking on the north side of Hosford Street between Dominion Drive and the driveway, and 1 car length on the west side of Dominion Drive at Hosford Street from the stop sign, and to include painting the curb on the north side between Boulder Ridge and Comfort Inn. To approve the 5th annual Ragnar Relay Foot Race August 20th and 21st, 2010 with the Relay Exchange Point in Lakefront Park. To approve the Locust Street car shows to be held on Locust Street between 2nd and 3rd Street from 5:30 p.m. to 9:10 p.m. on the first Friday of each month, May through September. To approve changing the no parking to 1-hour parking on the north side of the 100 block of Vine Street from November through March. To place on file the reports of the St. Croix EMS Chief and the Public Utility Commission minutes of March 9th, 2010, St. Croix EMS Commission minutes of March 9th, 2010, and the Community Access Board minutes of March 23rd, 2010. That is all.
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve. Roll call vote.
Morissette?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Birdsall?
Yes.
Bernard? Yes. Roll call, yes.
All right, the consent agenda is approved. We will move on with our Plan Commission agenda. Would it be all right with you if we did number 2 before number 1? Since Ms. Nessett was at the hearing, let's try to get that done while she's still here. Let's talk about considering rezoning parcels of property for consistency with land uses and zoning designations in the City Comprehensive Plan, ordinance number 3-10.
Again, this is the issue of consistency between the land use plan and zoning map, excuse me. So it's under a rezoning consideration. We're trying to get along the land use designations and the zoning as consistent as we possibly can, and this is our first effort to do so. The question that came up at the public hearing was why were the properties on the east side of 3rd Street, basically from Walnut Street to Locust Street, not all the properties, but approximately half of them being considered to be changed from R2 two-family residential district to C3 Central Business District. It is the recommendation of the Planning Commission and also the adoption of the Common Council of the comprehensive plan that is the intent and review of the Planning Commission to look at areas where the Central Business District may potentially expand. And it is the feeling of the Planning Commission that the most logical locations would be the 2 block areas just east of 3rd Street from Walnut Street to Locust Street. Other areas are looked at, but at this time we didn't feel a recommendation would be sent to the Common Council for that consideration. That doesn't mean that maybe 5 years as we look at re-reviewing the comprehensive plan, those recommendations may change. But at this time, that appeared to us to be the logical location for the Central Business District to expand if it is the desire of the Common Council and the Planning Commission to have it do so.
Move for first reading.
There's a motion for a first reading on ordinance 3-10. Is there a second? A second by Pam. Any discussion? Lee?
Well, I do support Karen's position here in that, you know, I don't think that we need to be ahead of the developer in converting things to be commercial, or recommending they're converted commercial until the proposal comes forward. You know, because you're not only affecting these homes, but you're consistently looking at, well, we might move commercial here and then we could commercial, you know, does it make more sense to look at when a request comes up, does that business belong in that location versus saying, you know, it's all right. So I think that we should reconsider that.
Lori.
I have a specific question about the B3 zoning. Do we have specific parking requirements that are associated with that?
Yes, we do. There, off-street parking is required. Now that we will have a consideration of a lieu of parking program where somebody could pay into a parking program in lieu of required parking. That will be considered at least in public hearing in the next Common Council meeting.
Okay.
Not, you know, in April 18th, I believe is the date. But yes, it's required. You have an exemption up to 6,000 square feet. Beyond 6,000 square feet, you're required to have off-street parking.
Denny, would it be safe to say that we don't have any restrictions on parking now for those locations?
They're basically they're under the R2, so they have a requirement of 2 parking stalls per parcel.
On their own property?
On their own property. Plus, it's such an old development, there is no parking there to begin with.
Right.
Okay, any other discussion?
I'm of the same mind as Lee. I think I'd like to have those properties reconsidered and take them as a proposal presented rather than converting them right now or making a change now.
Well, let me take a stab at playing devil's advocate for you on this. What has happened is state law changed. I'm not sure it makes sense what they did, but what they did is what they did. It used to be that we could have a plan, we could have our comprehensive plan, and it could be different from what the current zoning was. In other words, we could show in the plan that it is our plan that we might do this someday, but right now we've got it zoned as such and such use, if you follow that. So that we could leave it zoned residential, but we could say that this is our planning area where we might allow some expansion of the downtown. Am I stating that roughly correctly, Denny? That's the way it's been for years, and we've had a comprehensive plan for years. Well, the new state law is that you can't do that anymore. You have to have your land use planning has to be consistent with your zoning. So what it essentially means is that if we're going to leave it zoned residential, then we can't show anything in the plan for what we would do for it in the future. It just has to show on the plan as residential.
Or amend the comprehensive plan.
Which to me and to some others who have looked at this, guts in many ways kind of guts the whole idea of, well, let's spend some time and look at an orderly planning process for how the city might grow and develop over a period of time, because we won't stay static. So if the question was, hey, will there ever be more commercial in Hudson? Well, yeah. Does that mean we're going to rezone it all commercial right now? Well, no. But under this new plan, I mean, it's difficult. It's a somewhat difficult process. So while it makes perfect sense to do what you're saying, that's exactly the way we've done it in Hudson up till now. The reason you've got this list of all these isn't because we've done something new. In most cases, we have done nothing new. We are just being required by a state law to now either change the zoning or change the planning. And if you change the planning because of that, essentially what you're doing is letting someone in Madison who knows a lot less about Hudson than Denny Darnold does, or the 6 of you do, dictate to you what the planning will be, because you will have undone the plan process and gone back to what the existing zoning is on it. So, for example, on our schools, every single one of our elementary schools, for example, we've got, 5 elementary schools. In every single case, those always were purchased by the school district as residential property. They put a school in there, sometimes 100 years ago. And it's always just been left as R1 zoning. But we don't have it in our comp plan as residential. We don't intend that it'll probably ever be residential. It'll be a school. So in the old, there was no reason to change that. In the new, we're required to change that. So that's one of the steps. And those are pretty non-controversial. But in some cases, you're seeing here where this is our plan. I mean, our plan is, if you look at, for example, on the other side of the street out here, where homes have largely been allowed to become businesses, and yet the underlying zoning hasn't changed. And after a lot of discussion at the Plan Commission, this was what we came up with.
But when in one of these cases you have a use permit that gets reviewed, and you can have control over the property. If you flip it over to commercial, you have a little less control over future how to handle that business if a different kind of business comes in. Conditional use permits.
May I ask a question?
Answer that, because businesses in a residential are not a conditional use permit thing for the most part, are they?
Well, my response to Lee's concern is we're suggesting it be changed to central business district. If somebody makes a proposal for it to be used as a permitted use or conditional use permit in the central business district, we have an opportunity to look at that. But also, this tells the city we are looking at this half block, or 2 areas of half block on the east side of 3rd Street to be eventually moving. If you go back to the original zoning ordinance in 1957, the R2 two-family residential district was set up to allow the expansion of the central business district. That was intent. So it's been the intent for areas of the city of Hudson, central business to grow since 1957. It's not a new concept. Okay. At some point, the city of Hudson has to start looking at where the central business district may grow if we want to have economic vitality of the downtown. There's redevelopment, but there's also the potential for new development downtown. All we're saying is the Plan Commission, which was approved by the Common Council in December, we're looking at 2 block areas being potential areas. We're not saying it has to happen tomorrow. We're not saying it has to, but there are downtown guidelines, there are zoning requirements that they would have to follow. But at some point in time, you've got to start thinking about what areas are actually going to be the expansion areas for central business district and not just be reactionary to it.
Other discussion, comments?
Couple of comments. We have been interchanging commercial and B3 business as though they were the same thing in terminology. They are not. And B3 Business District does allow for residential habitation, as we have downtown already. So these can remain as 2-family residences for eternity if we like, or if the owners like. On the other hand, I don't know that taking 3 residences off of this list actually guts our comprehensive plan. It takes merely 3 residences off this list. That's why I moved for first reading, because I do believe this takes further consideration. My first reaction is to agree with Pam and Lee that I don't see the need for this change at this time. This is something we did not catch because we were operating under the old way we did things of, your comprehensive plan didn't necessarily have to conform to your zoning. And in this town, we have zoning house by house, so it's very particular. So I would like to see us come back at our second and final reading with thoughts a little bit more gelled on this.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
I'm not certain. There's a little bit of confusion and just talk amongst municipal attorneys. I think about what that consistency requirement means and how it's to be implemented. I think you can argue that any zoning decisions that the city makes after having a comprehensive plan need to be consistent with its comprehensive plan. I don't know that that means you have to initiate the rezoning. What you're saying is in your plan is that, okay, if someone comes and asks to rezone that to something different than B3, I'm assuming it's shown as B3 in the comp plan.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to amend your comp plan to do something different than B3. But I don't know that it requires you to formally initiate rezoning right now to be consistent with your comp plan. It's just that the city cannot make a rezoning decision in the future that's inconsistent with its comp plan. That's my understanding of it. It hasn't been implemented or applied very much yet because it's relatively new, but I think that's worth looking into a little further, because rezoning a piece of property does make a difference for these properties. They become a non-conforming use.
Well, absolutely.
So-
Well, I think between now and any second reading, we better
Yeah,
do some more research on that question, because that goes to the whole heart of whether we need to be doing this at all.
Well, some of your situations like you described, a school is already used as a school, the property is used as a school in our,
Yeah.
whatever it is. That makes sense. Then you're consistent, you're not changing anything, you're reflecting what's the use is on the ground. But, I mean, there's merit to what Denny says in that by rezoning, you are making the affirmative, yes, this is what we want. And that's a policy decision, for the council to make. It's just not completely clear that you have to initiate the rezoning, whether that's discretionary and you can wait for a subsequent application, in which case it would have to be a rezoning to B3.
How about we try to split this into two parts between now and the second reading? Those that, what I called non-controversial, essentially bringing it all up to what its current and past use has been, and then these others where we're bringing the zoning into what our planning is and vice versa. If we don't have to do those, maybe we don't want to. It never made sense to me that we were forced into this whole thing.
I had one just follow-on question, that is, if one of these homes becomes B3 and that property owner decides that they want to rebuild it as a single-family downtown home, are they going to be prevented from doing that because it's now a business district?
I think residence is allowed in a B3.
There are residences now in the B3
Okay,
district.
I just didn't know.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question. When you did
Any
that
other
conversion.
discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the ordinance, first reading passes. And we'll bring it back. Hey, wait a minute, before you leave, Karen. Now, here's 3 of our unsung heroes sitting right here because we have so many boards and committees, and it just occurred to me that of our Board of Zoning Appeals, we've got longtime member Karen Nessett, and she was here tonight and giving us good input. And we've got Gordon Kennard is a member, and then also we have Mary Yakub. You're a alternate, right? You're an alternate. So we have 3 of the members, so we should give them some recognition and thanks for all their hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move back to number 1, the conditional use permit to expand the area for non-metallic mining in St. Croix Business Park from 9.3 to 18.9 acres. Outlot 1, St. Croix Business Park, Milestone Materials.
The Plan Commission recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit to Milestone Materials to expand the non-metallic mining operations from 9.3 to 18.9 acres on Outlot 1, St. Croix Business Park, with the following conditions. A minimum of 3 feet of dirt cover required as part of the reclamation plan and erosion control plan for the site is to be submitted for approval by the city engineer and community development director for the designated quarry area. The security in the form acceptable to the city attorney for $4,000 per acre to secure the implementation of the reclamation plans. No sales of black dirt from the quarry, hauling access road to access at Henry Road only. There are 3 parties that expressed concern at the public hearing. One of them, Mr. Craig Shirley, sent a letter that was handed to me just before the meeting started. It says, several weeks ago I stood up in front of the City of Hudson Plan Commission meeting and addressed my concerns regarding removal of the majority of the hill that comprises the view we have from the Special Children's Center building that I own. I was concerned not just about the view, but also about noise of the blasting causing our noise-sensitive, autistic, and sensory-defensive children to become panicky and perhaps violent. Last Monday and again today, I walked the property of the Mimbach principals. We came to a workable solution for the best interest of all. In short, they have proposed to pull back the amount of hill they would remove and would leave a significant number of trees as visual buffer adjacent and to the east of proposed berm and all along the working area as the project moves to the north. The remaining elevation would be closer to and slightly above the elevation of the Spatial Children's Center building so as to eliminate my having visual access to the other side of the quarry from my building. They also said the blasting was infrequent and that the drilling noise was now done with a newer machine that moved the pounding noise underground and was far quieter. As a result of my discussions with the quarry group, I wish to state here that I believe we have come to a workable resolution of my concerns and I will not stand in the way of this project. Mr. Craig Shirley, dated March 29, 2010. The representatives of Milestone Quarry is here tonight. They did present a PowerPoint presentation which is available to be reviewed tonight if the council so desires.
Well, let's take all the time that the council desires for that presentation or no time, depending on what you wish. And we did go through it in some depth at the Plan Commission. There were several neighbors there expressing concerns, and I think that the operators of the quarry have been able to talk with some or all of them, and as Mr. Shirley said, because he had some concerns that night, I think there are workable solutions to their concerns. So I'd recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have a long-term question. So after you got everything dug out of there, what's the eventual restoration of the property to a, what's it going to look like when it's all done in maybe 5 years or 10 years and after everything's all quarried out?
Well, it's more likely a 20-year period of time, and eventually what we had desired to do is try to expand the St. Croix Business Park into that area. The second option would be the potential for recreational use of that area or a combined consideration of both recreational use and the expansion of the St. Croix Business Park. Business Park now has an option, or not option, a right of first refusal, I believe, to potentially purchase the property in the future. Is long-term thinking that this is one of the few areas we may be able to expand industrial use into with what available land we have currently in the city of Hudson.
Okay.
I have one minor question. Under your recommendation that a security in a form acceptable to the city attorney of $4,000 per acre, just to assure that the reclamation proceeds, are we talking 4,000 times what, 9.6 acres? They talked about 1,000 per disturbed acre. I just want to make sure we're
Total acreage.
okay. So you're saying 4,000 per total acreage that they're expanding. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? I think in this packet, the reclamation concept is here.
I saw the grading plan, yeah. So
That's an artist's rendering of
right.
part of what it might look like.
But I want to also get it out for those people on TV thinking of what's it going to look like in the future.
Other questions? Ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passed. And CUP is approved. Okay, that was item number 1. We've done 1 and 2. That's going to move us, we're finished with Plan Commission. Let's move on to Finance Committee. Several of those were on consent. I think the first would be number 4. Consider transfer of $90,000 from restricted cash balance to meet EMS cash flow. The recommendation from the EMS Commission and from the Finance Committee is to approve the transfer.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any discussion?
I'd like to point out and remind the EMS Commission, I thought that our joint meeting with them was very helpful, that we could get together and talk about this exact issue and the factors influencing it. We need to keep uppermost in our mind. I want EMS to keep uppermost in their mind that they're now spending the eating money. This is taking capital funds and using them for operating expenses, and a better way has to be found.
Couldn't agree more. Anyone else? Other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion passes, and we'll move on to number 6, which is to consider funding of the EMS SERT program. The recommendation from the Finance Committee was to postpone this item until a future date to allow further study by the chief to refine the recommendation, look at the long-term, short-term financial implications of it.
Move to postpone.
Motion and a second to postpone. Any discussion? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion passed. Number 9, application of Mark Vongers for special event permit for Gopher to Badger race event on August 14th, 2010. Finance Committee recommended approval, and the department heads recommended approval.
Move to approve.
So motion and a second to approve. Any questions? Discussion?
Do we need to make a special note of the 6 a.m. start, or is that incorporated in the approval?
It was on the issue sheet and in the Finance Committee recommendation, but thanks for pointing that out. There's 3 contingencies that we should include in our motion. One was that all signage would be picked up at the completion of the event. Number 2 is that the start time would be 6 a.m., which is, I think, an hour earlier than we routinely allow. And third, to reduce the amount of the insurance coverage from liability, bodily injury, and property damage down to $2 million. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passed, and we'll move on then to number 10. Consider remodeling plans for the EMS space in the lower level of City Hall. We're going kind of low-tech on our audio-visual aids, but here's the brief. So our budget for remodeling at 700 First Street was $200,000 to accomplish the police department remodeling. The suggestion here is that we take $4,000 that were in the 2010 budget for recarpeting the downstairs and add to that $25,000 that I believe will be left over from what was budgeted for the police department remodeling, and instead use that $25,000 on this project. So that's in a nutshell what's being asked. And with the $29,000, then we'll make some minor changes. Opening up by removing a wall right here that lets the current closed vestibule entry of the police department be opened. We'll be creating a conference room for joint use in this area, and we'll look at an optional add bid for adding a second door there. We'll add a floor-to-ceiling wall here with the removal of the current service counter for the police department. This will instead become a walled-in office, creating a 2-room office suite for the clerical staff, and creation of a new customer service window there and a little lobby entry area here. And then there are offices for the EMS director, the fire chief. There's computer and office space for the EMS staff. We've got sleeping quarters for men and women, storage area. This is an added doorway here. And by adding that door, and with this door being closed and locked to the public generally, what you've got is essentially south of this line, these are all publicly accessible and open office space for the public to come and meet with staff. Back here, this is the private ambulance staff areas where they've got the day room and again sleeping quarters, locker room space. Should be very adequate space in that regard for them, and it will remove the need for us to rent the apartment that we currently rent for them to use while they're waiting for calls on overnight shifts and so on. So that's the main part of it, and the hope is that we can get not only that remodeling done and the recarpeting for under the $29,000, but that we can also do plans and specs on what will be potentially Part B of this, which is reconfiguring the doors for the garage space from 3 smaller doors, removing the 2 supporting pillars between the 3 doors, replacing those 2 pillars with 1 pillar centrally, creating 2 larger doors that allow larger and wider and taller vehicles go in there. This project we believe would cost over $25,000. Not asking for approval of the project now, but because of the size of it and because it involves a structural change to the building, this requires full engineering plans and specs and a full formal bid process. So the thought is that we will not only be able to get this changed into operational space, but we'll also be able to get this engineered and then come back and talk about funding, whether it gets funded this year, in the future, or not at all, depending on how expensive it looks to be. Questions?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes, and so number 10 is done. Number 11 is a request to fill a vacancy of Clerk 2 position in the Police Department. Staff recommendation from Chief Jensen is to fill this position, and the Finance Committee recommendation was to fill it. It was created by a vacancy from a transfer out. That vacancy looks like it'll be permanent, and so the recommendation is to fill that position.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes. Number 12 is an equipment request for interview rooms in the police department, remodeling project. Chief Jensen is here to answer questions if you have them. This was on our desired list to accomplish in there, but when we got our original design concepts, we had sort of a base, a better and a best, and it looked like the better and best were really out of our financial reach under the $200,000 budget. As it happened, our bids came in low enough that it looks like between the some grant monies that they've received from 2 different sources, $2,700 covering about half of this. So the request by the Police Department and the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to go ahead and create these 2 interview rooms. So it involves a regular interview room and then a soft interview room that has couches and so on. So if you've got kind of 2 different scenarios, it will have recording equipment and in another outside viewing area there will be monitors and so on, so someone could watch what was happening there.
Move to approve.
There's a motion and a second to approve.
Could we specify that it is home electronic specialists we're approving?
Yes.
That's not in the recommendation.
Yes.
It's not in the staff recommendation wording at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, good point. Is that okay with the motioner
Yes.
and seconder? So to be specific, it's to approve the purchase of equipment and installation from Home Electronics Specialists in the amount of $5,473.83. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that purchase is approved. Let's see, we'll go to Public Works Committee. No, we put that on consent. Public Safety Committee, number 1. Lori?
Chuck is here to talk about some of the discussion that we had regarding the Second and Vine Street intersection. Do you want to review some of that?
So the item is to discuss the detour route for Second and Vine Street intersection improvement project.
Yeah, excuse me, at the most recent public safety meeting, we did talk about the detour route. And essentially, for the Second and Vine Street project, what that project is to reconstruct just that intersection. The detour route we presented was, starts when you're going northbound at Second and Cooley, or Second and Buckeye there, and reroute the through traffic down to First Street, north all the way up to St. Croix Trail, and then back on St. Croix Trail back to Second. Okay, that's a detour route going north, and likewise that's the same detour route for southbound traffic. Basically, there were 3 major outcomes from the public safety meeting, or 3 concerns. One was dealing with the pedestrian crossing of First, because that's where the detour is, and after that meeting, we did go back to the office, do some more discussions. Your Public Works Director, Tom Zulli, came to our office too and was part of these discussions. And what we're proposing to deal with the pedestrian crossing now is to shut the ped crossing at Walnut Street and direct them towards Locust at that crossing. And so we would be shutting down one crossing, but using signage for the pedestrians, letting them know to go down to Locust. It isn't 100%. We've gone back and forth as far as the Walnut crossing and the Locust crossing, but we're at this point leaning towards the Locust crossing as being the one where we'll direct people. The second outcome was signage informing everyone that downtown is open, business as usual, and making sure that that's incorporated so people in town and out of town know that your downtown's open. And the third major discussion point was detour enhancements on both the south end and the north end. At the south end, some signaling enhancements will be incorporated to allow longer greens for the northbound traffic, so we don't have that queued up, and during the heavier periods of the day we can get them routed to First Street. On the north end, at Second and St. Croix Street, there's a right now it's the side streets onto Second that have the stop signs. We'll essentially remove the one on St. Croix Trail, and St. Croix Street, and put that on Second. And so the kind of the priority of the preference would be the traffic turning on Second onto St. Croix Street, and Second St. Croix Street turning on to Second there. If that makes sense. And also doing some signage modifications down at First and St. Croix Street. Again, giving preference to the detour route.
Chuck, I'm wondering if that stop sign on Vine Street, so I'm thinking about southbound traffic, if it could be right turn, no stop. You know what I'm saying? So they can go onto St. Croix Street without stopping. It's only if you're going to be crossing that street that traffic would have to stop. Are you with me? Anyone with me?
Okay.
Coming down.
So in the morning, all the traffic from North Hudson, no stop on the right, but, yeah.
For west, if you're heading west onto St. Croix.
Yeah.
Can you give me the rationale for why you want to divert so early and then stay over so long? In other words, instead of putting them off onto First and leaving them there for 9 blocks so that they're over there 4 to 5 blocks before and 4 to 5 blocks after, wouldn't there be less disruption if it was business as usual until you got to, say, Walnut, and you went down and then you came? I'm just asking, why? I mean, this is about the longest detour you could go. You can't get off there any faster, and you can't stay on there any longer. So this is absolutely the longest detour that you could have devised. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to have a shorter detour with less disruption so that for more people it's business as usual?
Well, and in regards to the people familiar with Hudson and doing business, and those will be options, but we're trying to gear this more towards the through traffic and getting them off kind of the beaten track. And so discussions with Public Works and internally, we just thought it would be better to take advantage of the Buckeye signal and get them over to First, and likewise up on St. Croix Street, just to get them over. Yeah, I mean, that was discussion. I mean, we considerable amount of discussion, but some of those other streets, in particular north of the construction area, fairly residential, and we just thought taking advantage of St. Croix Street would.
St. Croix Street's probably the most stable of those, of all those side streets, or the nicest.
Also, if we allow people to go north further into the downtown area, with the flow of traffic we will have, that's going to stymie downtown quite a bit and make traffic stagnant. Let's get it off onto First Street. For those people who just want to pass through, let them pass through.
Okay. And one of the points we made too at Public Safety, that the thought is get it set up and observe it for a period of 3 days to see how it's working. Make some minor modifications, at that point if we feel they're necessary.
One information, I'm assuming that this is just for discussion not on the scope and the project itself, but just to approve the detour route, is that correct?
This was sent from Public Safety, and my understanding is it only pertains to the route, and we're still in discussion about the whole project.
So that's at a different date?
When would we do that, Chuck?
Well, the schedule is right now is to present plans and specifications for your consideration April 19th.
All right.
And that would include the alternates. And then at that point, we'd be seeking your approval to move forward with advertising for bids.
Because quite frankly, I think this is the wrong time for us to approach this project, but I'll save it for the April meeting.
One question, the rationale for choosing Locust Street instead of Walnut Street for a pedestrian crossing, what went into that? I'm just thinking because of the arch, it's kind of a logical place where I think a lot of people cross. And
well, I think primarily just because of the band shell and the FIPS and that portion of it. The detailed discussions on that, I'd have to invite Tom up. He came down and met with my 2 design engineers, and unfortunately, I had some other issues arise in one of my clients, and so they kind of finished up that discussion.
I mean, we're not going to be prohibiting people from crossing. You're just going to make Locust more amenable for.
I think that you could go either way after our discussion, on Locust or Walnut. Just on Locust Street, you could, I think there's 3 painted crosswalks there right now. And we're just, I guess you could, that was my thought, that there was already 3 painted crosswalks at Locust Street.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's
what we
better.
did last time was we put in the pedestrian crossing stake in the middle of the intersection. That really slows people down.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
Move to approve.
And we do now. Is there a second? Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we got that one approved. Let's see, we're on to number 4, request of Final Stretch Incorporated for a triathlon race September 4th and 5th, 2010.
Yeah, the one thing we had asked is that, that they come up with an alternate route, given the construction that we may have going on at that time, so I believe that's what's on our table tonight, and so we had approved it just with the additional contingency that they would come up with an alternate route, which it appears they have done, so I would move it forward for approval.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, map 94 is approved. Number 6, consider the 2010 deer management program with River Valley Deer Management, and consider ordinance number 5-10 to allow bow hunting in the city within the deer control program.
I have a question. Did we not already have the first reading on this, or am I wrong? Did we discuss it at some
Don't
point?
know, I think
Is that a first
the mayor
reading or not?
just kind of introduced it, I don't know.
I read it and referred it to committee, to the Public Safety Committee for recommendation whether it's right for the city in general, and also to the Park Board to decide whether it was right for any part of any park.
Okay, so we have not had a reading on it yet.
I don't believe we have.
Move for first reading.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second for a first reading. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do. I'd like to bring up a couple of comments. I know we're gonna do first reading. Residents in District 1 that I've talked with, and doing some research over the accident reports within District 1, I brought these up at Public Safety, that since the last hunt in 2006, 4 years ago, we've had 5 accidents within that, which is an average of about 1.5 over the 4 years. The people that I have talked to in the district don't want that hunt to take place. I'd like to see, I do believe there is probably issues in other districts in Hudson, but I'd like to see the District 1 be excluded from the hunt, except for private residents who ask for that. And that's how I will approach this issue until the end.
All right, other discussion?
Tell me about the screening or the applicants, or who can participate? Is there some kind of a skill level, or if they're gonna be in residential areas, who can participate in this activity?
Okay, so River Valley is an organization that was formed, and they did this in North Hudson. They based their group and their operations off successful programs elsewhere, so that they had a model to go by. I think in North Hudson they had 6, maybe 7 approved hunters. North Hudson's considerably smaller. I'm not sure exactly how many. They will take applications from people interested. There is a screening based on your experience and proficiency. Also, there's safety testing, and it's going to be an experienced group of hunters deciding who meets the criteria. They don't want to have someone who's not proficient or experienced, and we don't either. To clear up another question that came up, I think might have been a letter in the paper or something, was about, why are you paying to have this done when there are people that would do it for free? Well, the answer to that is there isn't any cost or financial impact to the city for doing this, but this is not a wide open deer hunt where all of a sudden everybody who's got a bow is hunting in the city. This is a controlled hunt, which means that very carefully selected sites, and Randy's point is right on, carefully selected sites will be where it happens. So when you said not in District 1 except for on private property, it isn't going to happen on anyone's private property unless they specifically ask for it, but there are a lot of people that are interested in having it happen on their private property. So that'll be, if we approve it, that'll be between them and the group to talk about when it would happen, where it would happen, and so on, to work that out on their private property. The other type of land ownership would be city-owned land that's not parkland, and we've got several of those. There are some that are, for example, stormwater retention areas. We've got wooded property that is owned by the water utility. Let me give you an example of a deer travel pathway that is pretty heavily traveled. If you started from the 7th Street Hill, where we've got our water reservoir there, it's not a tower, but the water reservoir and the water plant, you go up through there and you'll come out at the old Willow River Cemetery and then the cemetery, and then you go past there and you get to a residential area and the draw through to Hunter Hill, the Coons Hill area, and then you go from there across into Hunter Hill and you get over into Stone Pine, and you'll go from there out to the Atwood property. That's a major deer travel area, and maybe there aren't deer in District 1, but I'll tell you there are deer in those districts. And those people, sometimes have literally herds of deer come in their yard. And in my district, it is not unheard of. And Lori can probably attest to this because she's in that same. And so is Mr. Willie. That it's not unusual to have 5 to 10 come into your yard, and everything you've ever planted in there is bare to the ground. And so that's an area. Now, as you look through that area, there are areas in there that are not parkland. And, for example, the water, most people aren't even aware that there's a water department storage shed on 8th Street. I'd wager to say that there's a few of you that have been there, and most of us aren't aware of that. And it's a heavily wooded area. That's not parkland. It's not a place that people usually go, and so there are areas like that where honestly the public's not really going to know that this is happening at 5 a.m. in the morning, where it's not along a publicly traveled and used area. And then you still have the other thing of parkland, and I'm not sure where the park board is at with that, and that's still a
We have our
separate thing.
meeting on Thursday,
So
tomorrow.
You'll have a chance to talk about that further there. Any other questions or comments on the first reading?
I'd like to just mention that I did speak with a member of the Board of Trustees from North Hudson
Yes.
about their hunt, and 26 arrows were loosed. 27 were loosed and 26 were retrieved. One deer apparently got away wounded. So it was a pretty safe hunt.
Were you here to talk about this issue?
No, I did have a question that came up.
Yeah, okay, let's hear it.
I live in District 1, in Randy's district, and I wondered what the procedure would be if a group of us or any of us within that area would like to be included in this.
Well, if we do this, we would be entering in a contract that grants the exclusive right to do this to the River Valley, what's their name, their organization name?
River Valley Deer Management.
River Valley Deer Management. So you'd contact them, and it's up to them. They're going to be responsible and for all of it, and so it's up to them to decide who's the hunter and who isn't.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking in terms of doing the hunting, but
use
our land.
Oh, yes, sure. In the proposal, there would be a deer control committee that would be formed, that would be appointed by the mayor, and would have some representation from various groups, and we'll work out where it'll be allowed. The park board will have input. I imagine for the private property, if you want it to happen on your private property, you can talk directly to them. For the city-owned property, the committee will talk about that. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
No.
And motion passed 5-1 with Alderperson Morissette voting no. Let's see, that takes us to, lost my place now. What number are we on?
8, no smoking.
Oh, that's why. We're on the next page. Number 8, consider adoption of state smoking ban laws. Okay, well, some background on this first. State smoking ban is going to go into effect on July 5th. It was passed as Act 12. It has some implications for the city of Hudson. Our taverns in particular may have some questions about the implementation and enforcement of this rule. Clerk Nancy Kersan has brought up to me, maybe we should do something with local guidelines or a local ordinance or something. The chief brought up that he'd like to have a local ordinance. So the chief and public safety scheduled it as an item for the public safety committee. And frankly, my first response on this was, why would we do anything? Why don't we just let it go into effect, give it a few months, and see how it works out? But there is an argument for adopting a local ordinance, and because that, I drafted an ordinance that would essentially incorporate by reference the exact definitions and criteria from the state law of what constitutes a violation, but instead would make it a local ordinance violation with a lower fine than what the state is. Part of the problem with doing a state referral, and there's a couple of ways it could be done. You write the citation, or you write a letter and refer it to the district attorney. In the state law, the Department of Justice is given police powers to enforce this, but it also says in the state law that all other law enforcement agencies shall enforce this law. And the challenge to this is then we send them off to circuit court, and we have to send our officers there to not only go take the report, but then go and testify at circuit court. It ends up being a lot for nothing. In other words, that's a losing proposition for us. So there's two components to the new state law for violations of the smoking ban. One has to do with, for example, a patron of a commercial establishment that was violating the smoking law. And the other has to do with the management of the smoking establishment that allows the violation of the smoking law. In the state law, the penalty for being an individual who violates is $100 and not more than $250. So not less than 100, not more than 250. Under a state law violation, if you've ever had a speeding ticket or something, you find that the $100 fine, by the time you get all the court costs and everything on there, it costs about $200 and some odd dollars. Right?
Yeah, except for this law, they've excluded it from some of the surcharges, from the drug law, crime lab, drug law enforcement surcharge and penalty surcharge. So
all right.
Won't be quite as expensive.
Won't be quite as expensive. And then for the patron, pardon me, not the patron, but for the proprietor, those that violate 101.123 sub 2M, relating to the responsibility of persons in charge who have allowed smoking, then they have a different fine under state law. So the question is, do you want to do anything locally? What I proposed was that we would use the state definitions and so on, so we'd be entirely in keeping with them, but we'd send them to municipal court or just allow the fine to be paid. What do you call it, a bond?
Yeah, the court will set a bond, the municipal, subject to council approval.
And I suggested not a token amount, but a lower amount than the state, that we could set it for $50 for the individual and $100 for the proprietor. We would keep all of that money in such a case, and it would be a much, much simpler process for us. It would be exactly like when we have, say, traffic violations. We write those as a local ordinance violation, even though it's a state law violation. What we've done is just wholly adopted through incorporation all the state traffic laws. So if you're driving without a license, that's a violation of state law, but we charge it under a local ordinance code violation. By doing that, we send them to municipal court, whatever the fine is or whatever, we take care of it all here. So with that model in mind, this is what I came up with as a straw man. Frankly, I'm not bothered at all if the mood of the council is to do absolutely nothing. However, incorporating the state law as it stands, I think, is just taking on their problem and making it our problem, which I think is a losing proposition. So
another way to simplify this even further is just to have the fine $20 and it can be paid on the spot. That way it doesn't have to go through all the court costs.
Officers don't collect money.
Well, you could
Move to suspend the rules to discuss this.
we've got a motion to suspend the rules towards adoption of 4-10.
I'll
Yes.
second.
In a second, any discussion on the motion to suspend the rules? Let's see, roll call vote on that.
Morset,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Wyland,
Yes.
Birchall,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Brogan.
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance 4-10.
I'll second.
All right, let's hear from Catherine. We got a motion and a second. She's got some input on this.
There is some, again, it's a new law, difference of opinion on whether municipalities can adopt a lower fine than authorized under state law. Generally, municipalities can be more restrictive than state law, can't be less. A lower fine could be considered less restrictive. On the other hand, the language in the new law that gives municipalities the authority to adopt a local ordinance does restrict the municipality's authority in certain areas, such as outdoor smoking, does not, and there's no other restriction on the municipality's authority. So I'm just telling, the other thing is a legislative council that's produced a memo seems to think that municipalities can adopt a lower fine. You need to adopt, in my opinion, a fine that's high enough to serve the purpose of the law. In other words, encourage compliance. In other words, you don't want just a token fine. I think that might be looked at skeptically. I just have to advise you that it's not clear whether you can adopt a lower fine. One thing you could do is adopt the state forfeitures and have a lower bond amount, so that if someone pays the ticket, they pay the bond amount that's approved by the judge and the council. If they contest it, they'd be looking at a forfeiture. You know, if they're contesting it and going to court, they'd be looking at a forfeiture under the state law.
I will amend my motion then to incorporate what you just mentioned, that we will stay with the bond amount that is listed here.
Well, there's a difference between forfeiture
Right.
and bond. Forfeiture is the not less than 100 nor more than 250. Bond is what's set locally.
Right.
Before you make that motion, I will also, it's just not clear. And so I'm not, well, I'm just, I don't know who is going to, whether it'll be challenged, who knows?
So if it's challenged, what's our problem in adopting this?
Who has standing to challenge it? The Attorney General?
That, or also private persons are given the authority to at least seek an order enjoining violations of the ordinance. So they have put in the legislation certain rights of private individuals seeking enforcement of the law. It's unlikely that it would be challenged. The remedy would be, okay, change your ordinance to be consistent with state law. I think you want to comply with the purpose of the law by having a sufficient enough fine.
The fact of it is, anyone who doesn't like this, I mean, whatever the facts of the incident that took place are, they could still be charged under the state law.
I don't know why you do that.
Well,
You mean just refer it?
Yes.
Even though you have a local ordinance?
Yes.
Well, you mean if they wish to contest it, they're free to pay a higher fine if they want to go to the state level,
Well, if they,
circuit court.
Here's what's going to happen here is the Department of Justice is not creating a police force to suddenly be the smoking police. If anyone gets called, it's going to be our police officers called.
Sure.
And that's exactly why we don't enforce traffic laws under the state law. We could. We will. But we also don't in a lot of situations. There is a choice there, and the choice is it's much more expedient. It is.
I'm not arguing one way or the other. I just have to advise you on some ramifications of
May I
your-
ask you, Counselor, if you would feel more comfortable if we changed our wording from shall be a forfeiture to shall be a posted bond of?
No, because the court sets the bond subject to
Okay.
council approval. I
I'm
think
gonna
you
stick
either
with
go
the
with
fact that it
the
is-
ordinance as
yeah.
proposed, or you can adopt the state law and go the other route with a lower
And
budget.
I wanted to bring up something that came up in public safety, which didn't show up here, and that was that the motion would say, doesn't go into effect until July 5th, and only if the state law is not overturned by then. So if the state law, somebody calls for reconsideration, this will not go into effect.
Okay.
I have one
I'm going
question.
to stick with my original motion with the proviso that, this can be negated if the state law is overturned, if there's legislative action on that. The mayor said the 5 magic words: we keep all the money. And I think it would be, we'd be derelict in our duty to to command our police force to constantly show up in circuit court at our expense, for which we get nothing. And we're going to have to offset that with taking in these fines. I'm going to stick with my original motion to approve the ordinance as written.
All right, any other discussion?
And I have a question. Are any other local communities taking this action at this point, or do we know the numbers that they're using in their local ordinance?
Well, yeah, there's been a conversation on the city attorney's listserv. One attorney said he knows of 45 municipalities who are not doing anything. With regard to the forfeiture, I think the people that responded were adopting the state law forfeiture, but didn't have an opinion or were just unknown whether you can adopt a lower forfeiture.
So is it 100 and 250 whether you're the individual or the proprietor? Is it this?
It's for the proprietor, it's $100, and I think it's just one, that's the most they can pay in a day. It's just for the individual violation, that's
The
one.
state statute.
Yep.
We're strictly talking about the ordinance in front of us, which I have brought forward from public safety, but I'll tell you what, this is overreaching. I'll say it once, and I don't agree with it at all, but it's the law we have to enforce. And this makes it easier for us to take care of it at our level.
Any other discussion? All right, let's see, we suspended the rules, so this would be a vote on whether to adopt the ordinance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ordinance is adopted.
Nobody wants.
All right, that was one of the most unenthusiastic votes I've ever heard.
And it should have been.
New business, A, review bids and consider accepting proposal for spring and fall leaf collection program. Tom Zuli is here. The recommendation is do similar to what we've had in the past, but there's a little new twist.
We submitted bids for the collection of leaves this spring and only received one bid from, RCD Disposal in River Falls. We got 2 different quotes from RCD. One includes the disposal of plastic bags with leaves and grass clippings. The other one is biodegradable type bags. Based on the estimates of what our normal program takes in, the cost difference between the 2 programs would be about $3,000. I would like to propose that we have possibly 2 different dumpsters where we can have biodegradable bags go into one dumpster, and then the other dumpster would be where we open the bags and have a place where we can dispose of the plastic bags. I think that we're providing a service to the community, and to save those $3,000, I think that we could ask that the people bringing the leaves could empty their own bags. I know that's what they do in River Falls at the compost center down in River Falls, is that they would bring the bags to a dumpster. We can have that back end of the dumpster open. They could open their bags, and we'll have a place to put the plastic bags in. I just feel that this way we can get the community used to using the biodegradable bags. I think that's just, you know, the state law in Minnesota doesn't allow any plastic bags at all. So I think this could be something that the state of Wisconsin will have soon. So that's just my one option. I did, one thing that came up at the Public Works meeting, I believe that Roseville, Minnesota had a way that they collect the leaves, and they actually rake the leaves out onto the boulevard, and the Public Works crews come with a truck and like a big, actually they have 3 vacuums that suck the leaves up. That takes 12 to 15 days. He said it was very labor intense. They do have a 4-acre compost site that they can drop the leaves off to, where we don't, but they said they've been doing that for 10 years, and they charge the residents like $25 per whatever they have in your front boulevard. So they said that's actually worked out pretty well, but they said it was very labor intense. They have machinery and their truck set up, and you have to have 2 or 3 guys per truck and vacuum and things like that.
So that charge that residents incur, does it offset?
Everyone gets a charge.
Yeah, but does it offset the cost of the 12
They
to
said they have in between 1,500 and 2,000 residents that they use the service.
So everyone who uses it gets charged, not everyone who lives in the community.
Yeah.
You pay if you use it.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
That's the way I believe that he meant, yes.
Has River City said okay to 2 different types of dumpsters? One
I haven't checked into that yet. I mean, I don't know why they want to give us quotes on either one of them. And I think there was another question that this does go to a compost site. It's down by Pierce County, must be down by Ellsworth, so it goes to a compost site that has licensed DNR approval and things like that.
So can we go directly there? Can our residents go directly there?
I tried to get a hold of the owner of the disposal. It's called All Natural Recycling today, and I would like to check into this further and maybe even check into the possibility if we could haul down our leaves ourselves with our vehicles. I couldn't get a hold of them. I tried all day, but maybe that's an option we could check into in the fall if we had our new tandem trucks and we got proper tarping, and see if we could save the dumpster fees and haul them down ourselves.
Tom, we are reimbursed by the county for a certain percentage of this amount here. Do I remember correctly that it's approximately 75%?
That's the way I understand it, yes.
So of the 19,350, we get about 75% of that back. I'd like to point out to the council that I just recently had a conversation with somebody actually in the grocery business, talking about plastic bags, and you're always asked paper or plastic, at the checkout. And his point was that actually the carbon footprint left by manufacturing and transporting the much heavier paper bags offsets any savings you get, any green effect with plastic bags. And and there is no such thing as biodegradable plastic unless you want to wait many, many dozens of years. So I'm going to move that we accept the $19,350 offer, unless Tom is able to work out a split arrangement with River City.
All right, so that's a motion to accept the $19,350 offer unless we can do a split program with both.
Second.
There's a second. Discussion.
I'm confused. Why would we not go with the less expensive plan and just ask residents to not leave their plastic bags behind?
Well, here, let me help. Can I?
Sure.
First, some misconceptions. And number one, the question came up, well, why are we, if we've got a sustainability commitment, why are we having people bag in plastic bags so those bags are going into a landfill? Point number one, our leaves are not going into a landfill. By law, they must be composted. A lot of people say, why don't we have a compost site? Well, the fact of it is it takes space. There are some pretty strict environmental regulations because there's runoff from compost that needs to be contained and controlled. And so we do have a compost site, it's just not ours. We rent the use of it essentially on a volume basis, and that's where it goes. And it's much more cost-effective than running our own. We could do that. River Falls runs their own. It was just in the paper about how they're begging people not to put their trash and so on in there because it's so much work for the public works crews to go and try to get the trash out of the compost site and so on. Whereas that's one of the reasons that they don't want, everybody going to the compost site at the professional composters. So when we started this current plan about 10 years ago, we looked in pretty serious, in-depth discussion when I was on the Public Works Committee about starting our own compost site and what the equipment involved would be and what the man hours involved and so on. And we could still do it. It's a popular idea. I do get that as a comment all the time. Why don't we compost instead of this plan? But this plan has worked pretty well. So bags are not going into compost. What happens now is they get driven there, a man stands there and cuts the bag open and dumps them back open again. Now, if you want to go with just simply that plan, for every resident who needs to bag them to take them to the central place, then our residents are going to have to bag them. And when they get there, because they're not allowed to bag their bag behind them, they have to stand and rip all the bags. And so for a whole dumpster load of ripping bags, for a whole dumpster load of ripped bags, we're going to save $50 or something for all the trouble that we will have put our residents through. In other words, that's what their guy gets paid for standing there and cutting those bags right now at the compost site.
I have a question about what you're talking about, because that is not on the paperwork here. Laurie, to answer your question, why aren't we talking about people ripping open their bags, as the mayor's discussing, is that's not one of the two options. It's biodegradable bags or it's plastic bags.
No,
it's bags.
No, it's not. It's biodegradable bags, bulk rate drop-off.
So your bulk rate in this case
drop-off
stands for an opened bag and just loose.
In the idea that they've got in discussion with RCD is there's a couple of ways it can be done. People might bring larger vehicles, like you, where you've done your program where you go around. Now you might have a large open trailer and you just pull up to people, they've raked them to the side of the road, get them into the trailer, you don't have to go through the bagging process anymore. Get them into the trailer, haul them to the site, get them out of the trailer. That might be more convenient, but for all those people that already still have to bag, if you go strictly with option 2 here, the biodegradable or the bulk, you are forcing the cost onto them. How much do the biodegradable bags cost per bag?
I'm not sure.
They're expensive. And or they've got to use their regular bag that they're going to buy in any store or they've already got at home. But when we get to the site, now we're going to have a man there who makes sure that they don't put their bag into our thing, because now they're going to take this to a different place in a different way without having the guy stand there and check and get all the plastic out of there. So what you're doing is you're not really saving money, you're putting a new burden on the residents if you do it that way. That's why Tom recommended both. So when the people get there, you can say, hey, if you got them in a plastic bag, put them over here. We'll pay to have somebody empty them back out of the plastic bag for you. Recycle the plastic, recycle the leaves. Otherwise, if you want to do it the new, probably better way or bulk way, then go ahead and buy the bag yourself or bring them here in bulk. Get them into the dumpster yourself, because you're going to have to get your loose bags into the dumpster now. So you see, our other plan actually has worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? With the city of Roseville, was there thought that the cost associated with picking it up was offset by the fee that they charge? I mean, it sounds like you've got sorting that needs to happen, you've got labor that you're putting into sorting, but I keep thinking about, if you're sorting through trash and other things, I guess I'm interested in what the city of Roseville's thoughts were on if they thought it was a fiscally responsible way to handle this situation.
I just talked with them for a short time and really didn't get into that part. I just asked him how the operation worked and what kind of equipment he had, so.
I think when you do the numbers, it seems like it probably close to what's on the sheet, unless.
We're not set up to do what Roseville's doing right now.
Well, it's just a question, if you're thinking about directions we can go, I guess I'd be interested in learning. And do they own the equipment, or do they bring it in from somewhere else?
They own the equipment. They said they have 3 blowers and they have special trucks with boxes and they blow the leaves in the
There is no way you can even come close to the cost effectiveness of what we're doing with that plan. In Minnesota, everything is done differently. I mean, they'll put a special charge on, like you get your utility bill. I mean, every time they clean your alley or sweep the street in front of you, there's charges for street light maintenance and every little thing. And yeah, there's going to be a charge for picking up your leaves now. And we just do it on the general property tax, and we do it pretty cost effectively for the whole city for this.
Well, the actual cost to us is about $5,000.
I just want to ask where you got you said it's a $50 difference?
Okay, when you look at what they put on the tipping fee, okay, the dumpster charge is the same. The tipping fee per 30-yard dumpster, the cost if they're in plastic bags and need to be ripped open, that costs $8 per yard, which is, what, $240 per dumpster for the tipping fee. If instead you did the other way, help me with the math there, what's 30?
Or 180.
It was 180. So it looks to me like you'd save $62 or something so $62 per dumpster load. You're either going to save that for the, but we're putting an additional burden on our people. I'm fine with the option, and I said to Tom, as a pilot, why don't we try it with the option? If everybody loves it that way, next year you want to do it only that way. I suspect there will be a fair number of traditionalists that still want to use plastic bags. And you know what? They could help us by going there and taking the time to open them up and put them in the bulk bin for us. And they'll know that every time the city fills a dumpster that way, we as a group will have saved on the tax rolls $62.
Why not?
My only concern would be that if, currently our dumping area is not locked up or secured all the time. If people sometimes come in after our attendant has left, could be dropping off, a lot of leaves or something that are in plastic bags, and we would have to, I guess at that point, we could still put them in the one dumpster that we have designated for plastic bags. If we go totally paper bags, then that might be an issue.
I think you're gonna run into it anyway, you're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah, so I just thought it was an option we could try and then, reevaluate this fall.
One point I've got for you is this a good example why items go through committee and don't come directly here, like this one just did. So committee as the whole is not the most efficient way. All right, you've got a motion, question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
All right, we got 4-2, Bernard and Morissette voting no. All right, we do have closed session scheduled. I see our attorney is here. Let's try to get done. What do we got left? Communications and recommendations from the mayor. I mentioned the census. Your mailed-in form needs to go in by April 15th. Whoever hasn't responded by mail by April 15th, that starts the process where they're going to send out a census worker to your door to try to clean up and contact all the residences where there was not a response. I'd encourage you to save the federal government money by responding to your form. If you have a concern that it's intrusive and that they're asking for too much information, I'll tell you that it's all confidential, but you should fill out at least how many people there and as much as you can, and if they don't get the information they want, they're still going to send a census worker to your door, and they're going to come and try to collect that information anyway.
I think it's 72 years before specific information on who's on the census report is released.
So, let's win the challenge with River Falls. As of today, there's a daily posting on the Census Bureau website. As of today, we're in the lead. We have 43%, and they both have 42%. So get those forms sent in.
Mr. Mayor, are you going to share the dinner, or?
Anybody who wants to come can come. Absolutely. As long as you offer to help me pay for them if we don't win.
It's a deal.
We'll make it a big picnic event. Okay. Any other alderperson communications or items for future agenda, Scott?
Like to see on the April 19th agenda, our next meeting, which is 3 weeks from now, discussion and resolution of the applications for liquor license. It's been a couple of months since we allowed that liquor license to become available, and I think we ought not to keep people hanging in limbo. We ought to decide.
All right.
I
have a statement. I have made a decision to withdraw from the next election. So to ensure that the public is aware of that, I wanted to make that statement tonight.
Okay.
I need to clarify too that when that happens, the candidate still qualifies for ballot status and her name will still be on the ballot. And if it turns out that she wins the election, then she can choose to decline or hold the office. And if she declines, then Chapter 17 would need to be followed to fill the position.
Okay. Any other alderperson? City attorney? City administrator?
Speaking of the election, it is April 6th. Voting is from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If any citizens need to know where their polling place is, please contact City Hall and we'll help you get to the right place.
Okay. Also, in regard to the census, we have a census worker that's stationed in Hudson at our 4th Street Municipal Building. There's an 800 number on the city website. If you have questions about how to do it, you can call that 800 number, or we have resources to help you. Okay. You were done? Then I think we're ready to. Boy, we did well for as long as that agenda was in an hour and a half.
Move to go into closed session.
The motion to go into closed session
Second.
pursuant to Section 1985 1G of Wisconsin statutes to confer with legal counsel regarding current litigation with Lifeline Systems Incorporated, doing business as LifeQuest, and pursuant to Section 19. No, we won't need for public sale. We won't do that. We will only be in closed session to talk with counsel on the litigation. Motion and a second. Roll call vote. Oh, was there any discussion on whether we should go in? Roll call vote.
Morissette?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Brokaw?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes, and we will be in closed session. You want to take